fence line where the wild winds run, where the skies stretch wide and kiss the sun. The sagebrush whispers, the rivers hum. This land's a story just begun. Wyoming calls where the heart beats free. Mountains rise and dreams run deep. Past the borders, past the sign, there's a world alive beyond the fence line. Boots hit gravel and the prairie sings with every hoofbeat. The frontier rings from ranchers' hands to miners' veins. The spirit of the West remains. Wyoming calls where the heart beats free. Mountains rise and dreams run deep. Past the borders, past the sign, there's a world alive beyond the fence line. So come ride with me through the dust and time. Find the soul of Wyoming beyond the fence line, beyond the fence beyond the fence line, beyond the fence beyond the fence line where the wild winds run, where the skies stretch wide and kiss the sun.
Hey, 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 good evening, Wyoming. I know, weird, right? I'm doing a live show in the evening. Actually, missed this morning's show. You guys probably saw my announcement. We had a really, really sick child that was up all night. And so, yeah, just kind of life happens, you know. And so here we are this evening having a quick chat about what's going on in Wyoming and also filling you in on the shows for the rest of the week, what we'll be talking about, the conversations we'll be having around my candidacy for Wyoming governor. So great to be here, you guys. If you watched any shows last week, you know I was getting in from Las Vegas. So it's really nice to be home in the wide open spaces. And hey, it's finally cold here in Cheyenne, a little bit of snow. So that's pretty cool. Anyways, let's dive into what's going on in Wyoming in the last week. Like it or love it, all kinds of stuff going on in preparation for, of course, the budget session of all budget sessions, right? You guys, I feel like every political cycle, it's the history making moment for us. And it just seems to get faster and faster and more complicated. And I really don't feel like we're getting anywhere quickly when it comes to our approach to things. I kind of feel like, we just get a lot of more of the same in a different way. Do you guys ever feel that way? You step back and you look at what's going on in politics in Wyoming, in the US. It's like, gosh, we're just kind of getting more of the same in a different way. And I don't feel like we're reducing bureaucracy. We're just sort of moving things around. What's going on with the Wyoming Business Council, UW, things like that. By the way, if you guys want to hear my take on UW and the Wyoming Business Council, listen to last Monday's episode on any of our social media channels, and you can find out what's going on there. So let's see what's going on in Wyoming. We've got all kinds of stuff happening this past week. Obviously, this battle over different funding of institutional bureaucracy. And this is an issue I want to address in this episode today because I think it's really important. We have created institutional bureaucracy for almost every aspect of our lives. Whether you look at, and what do I mean by that? It basically means government funded anything, funded by you and I for not the last 3 years, the last 4 years, but for decades. We've been funding virtually everything in our culture and society, these institutional bureaucracies, which have done things like destroying the free market, harmed education, healthcare, communities, collaboration, business, because we've got this idea that bureaucracy must fund everything. And so here we are going into the 2026 legislative session coming up here pretty quickly. And boy, we're fighting over funding, aren't we? So much. It almost pains me to watch as we're fighting for these principles of reducing bureaucracy. And I wonder how much of that we're actually going to get done in this legislative session. Because let's face it, everything we're doing right now and in the Joint Appropriations Committee is going to go to the House, it's going to go to the Senate, it's going to be fine-tuned, there's going to be amendments. What are we going to end up with, guys? As we look at the priorities in this upcoming session, of course we know budget, 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 right? We're trying to reduce spending. And, of course, we'll see how much that ends up. I would be thrilled if we get 5% cut. I don't know if we're going to see that, guys, if we're just being really, really honest. Obviously, last week we were focused a whole lot on the recalibration of education, which is supposed to be done every 5 years, and it's been about 15 years. So kudos to the committees for doing a recalibration of education. Of course, do I think recalibrating it is going to fix the problem? No, I don't. In fact, if you listened last week to my episode on education, I think it was Thursday last week, I did an episode on education. Great, we're recalibrating it. When are we going to step back and fix it? That's my question, because we're just going to keep legislating the thing, kind of just virtually to death. And I can't help but wonder where we're going to end up on education. We have to get to a point where we recognize that some of these institutional bureaucracies that we have are broken beyond repair. And that maybe, just maybe, it's time to do the hard work to break the thing down and start over again. And whether that's education or the Wyoming Business Council, for example. My idea on that is, could we fix the thing? Originally the Wyoming Business Council was founded. In fact, I was talking to someone who was involved in its early founding today. I had a little coffee with them today. And it was originally founded with a non-political, focus, purpose, and economic development. But unfortunately, that is strayed so far away from its original purpose. Could it be restored to its original purpose? I think it's worth taking a look at, but definitely taking a pause and step back to see what activities were actually economically beneficial to the great people of our state. It's a great question to ask. In other news, let's see. So, let's see. The calibration was happening. Obviously, we're looking to reduce the governor's budget here and there to make cuts, to make sure that we're being, good stewards of, I guess, taxpayer dollars and investments that we have here in the state. We're seeing a legislative agenda forming, really, really focused on a bunch of things, you guys. Obviously, education. Elections are a big deal, you guys. Guys, you really need to watch my episode on elections. And if you're not sure where to find it, comment below and I will show you where to comment. And while we're seeing some great ideas coming forth for elections, we don't need 80 bills worth of election solutions and or reform in Wyoming to get where we need to go. And it's important that you look at those facts because they're seeking to make it extremely difficult for anyone outside of party politics to ever run again in Wyoming. They're almost tripling the independent requirements. Why would you triple the requirements for independents when independents don't generally win anyways, unless you know that your party is in trouble? So you aren't doing these things for election safety and security. You're doing these things to secure your power and your control. I would urge you to look at some of these bills, and I'll be covering them in more detail in the coming weeks. Yes, we want safe, secure elections. We don't want fraud. Look at the facts in my election episode from last week. It would shock you. We don't have a ton of fraud in Wyoming. Almost none, in fact. And take a look at that because I think it's really, really important. There's debates now going on about Wyoming public media funding. What are we going to do with that? Again, my stand on these things is why are taxpayers funding everything? It is time for these organizations to figure out how to privately fund or let the free market decide what happens. The problem is that so many, we've gotten in this habit and it's going to hurt, but we got to get out of this habit of Wyoming taxpayers, U.S. taxpayers paying for everything. That's just got to stop, guys. And you know how I feel about that. In other news, Daniel Singh, you guys probably saw that, led the Freedom Caucus. I actually had a great sit down, a lunch with him actually last week. And we had a conversation about his decision to leave the Freedom Caucus and his desire to more independently represent the people who elected him. I love that. As you guys know, that's exactly what I'm doing in this governor's race. I want to be elected by the people and serve the people, not the party. And so that was kind of big news seeing that. And I would suspect if I was a betting man, which I am not, even though I was in Las Vegas last week, I didn't do any gambling. I thought about it at one point. I thought to myself, I wonder if AI could help me win at a slot machine. Of course, AI told me I'd have to push the button about 5 million times to win. So I decided to opt out of that. But I suspect that we will see, I hope to see more of our representatives leaving party echo chambers in the interest of serving the people that elected them. And hey, you guys, I'm out here hopefully leading the charge in that. And it's not to say that there isn't good, well-intentioned folks, within the party echo chambers and within these caucuses, if you will. But what I've observed is we stand on these principles, but the minute we walk in the room, it seems like so many of our principles have become optional. And that kind of lays into a lot of my reasoning why I decided to leave the party and to just focus on being something different as this sign kind of alludes to behind me. So what else is going on in Wyoming news? Well, we've got a bill to make ivermectin available over the counter. Again, I think I want to see bureaucracy getting out of the way of things. I want to see medical doctors making medical decisions. I want to see us solve these things at the lowest level where legislation is not required to decide whether or not ivermectin can be used over the counter or not. What's interesting to me is if I recollect correctly, we already passed this bill last year. I think it passed. So I'm going to look into that and see why that bill is coming up again. Maybe it didn't pass the Senate or something, and maybe I missed that. So I thought we already passed this last year. By the way, going back to what we passed last year, a lot of these election bills coming up this year are all election bills that did not make it last year. And so we're going to try again to do some of these things. And it's not all good and in the best interest of the voters of this great state. What else is going on in Wyoming? Obviously, property taxes are hot off the press in the legislature. We got a whole bunch of property tax ideas coming, from hack and slash to taking our time, rolling back, or transferring the burden to sales taxes, all of these ideas. I am actually going to talk. Let's see. I'm talking about property rights this week and public lands this week. I've also done a bit on property taxes, and I actually have a plan for that. You can go back and watch that episode as well. Uh, Instead of hacking and slashing, let's actually face this thing out. Let's do it right. Let's make a plan. Let's work with local leaders to come up with an actual, meaningful, workable solution for Wyoming and for its communities, both in our counties that would be unaffected, which there are some, but many of our depressed counties will be hit pretty hard. And we need to have a solution for them as well. In other news, just kind of some good news coming out. Obviously, Wyoming's hunger initiatives, stepped up to the plate when the SNAP program was paused to help some of our Wyoming families with their food needs. And of course, I encouraged people to just do what we should do and get government out of the way and just help our neighbors, feed our neighbors, love our neighbors, do that. We see that some Sheridan students were nominated for the U.S. Service Academics. That's really cool. Congratulations to those students out there. Um, all kinds of great stuff going on across Wyoming at the local level to you guys. Just people being communities, taking care of people, stuff like that. Let's see. What else do I want to talk about today? There's really not a lot else. We're all kind of, you know, bated breath to see what our legislative session is going to be. I do want to talk about my upcoming shows, and I think I'm going to actually let you guys know I'm actually going to run the shows. I think in the morning and in the evening. So if those of you that don't get to watch in the morning can watch in the evening. And of course, all the shows show up in the video libraries on our YouTube, our Rumble, our X, our Facebook. So you can always go back and watch an episode and see what I said about an issue that matters to you. A lot of times I push those back to people. Next week I may have to talk again about immigration, given what's going on in the world and stuff like that. But with that, what's coming up this week? So tomorrow I'm going to talk about my stand on public lands. That's going to be a lot of fun, you guys. I know it's a hot topic here in Wyoming, so we're going to talk about where I stand on public lands. And then Wednesday, you guys, it's going to be a tough episode to unpack because I'm just going to call it like it is. You guys, we are being deceived on a lot of levels by our national leaders. And Wednesday's is kind of talking about the national geopolitical landscape. It's about talking about the hard truth. It's about talking about the good things that are going on. It's about talking about the bad things that are going on. And just a sneak peek on what we're going to do on Wednesday, you guys, we're going to talk about how we had all of this lip service from Congress. And of course, they shut down the government last year over a couple of particular issues. And now Republicans in the House have just gone around and refunded all that stuff. We're funding the Department of Education at record levels and making it a permanent institution. Same with Medicaid and other organizations. We're giving $200 million to the Endowment of the Arts. Congratulations, taxpayers. We're giving tens of millions of dollars to government parties in this bill. $1.7 trillion. We're going to dive into all of that stuff on Wednesday. And you guys, I just want to tell you guys the truth. It's not my facts. It's not my version of the truth. It's just what's going on in the national stage. And it's important for our discussion here in Wyoming because whether we like it or not, it's going to affect us. And if we don't think it's going to affect us, it's going to start affecting us. The value of the dollar, just absolutely, dollar is getting decimated globally right now. We're going to talk about that stuff on Wednesday. Anyway, I don't want to get too deep into that. On Thursday, I'm going to talk about where I stand on property rights. So that's going to be the issue as well. I'm going to talk about property rights. On Friday's super special episode, I'm going to tell you my story. I'm going to share my family with you. I'm going to share with you kind of more of what led me onto this journey and running for governor, and hope that you'll find, a way to want to go ahead and support and get behind our movement, what we're doing here. With that, I hope you guys have a really, really great Monday evening. This is a little shorter episode than usual. We're going to get back on track here coming the next couple of days with our morning episodes. So God bless you guys. Take care and have a great night.
Sun up shining on a gravel drive, granddad's coffee in a styrofoam cup. Says, boy, this world will tell you keep what's yours, but that ain't how we were brought up. We bow our heads at the table, thank the Lord for the food and the fight, 'cause loving folks who love you back is easy, but that ain't walking in the light. Love your neighbor, mow his yard when he's hurting. Love your brother when he's slamming your door. Love the stranger when your pride says ignore him. Love the bitter heart twice what you did before. You can love your friends on Sunday morning, but Jesus taught a different kind of war. If you really want to shake this world for heaven, love your enemies more. Yeah, love your enemies more. She's got a Bible with a cracked leather spine, highlighter on every other page. Says turn the other cheek, ain't just a slogan. It's a narrow road you gotta pave. We pass the plates and the casseroles, fix the porch where the storm goes through. When they curse your name, you hit your knees, say, Father, bless them like you do. Love your neighbor, mow his yard when he's hurting. Love your brother when he's slamming your door. Love a stranger when your pride says ignore him. Love the bitter heart twice what you did before. You can love your friends on Sunday morning, but Jesus taught a different kind of war. If you really want to shake this world for heaven, love your enemies more. Yeah, your enemies more. She's got a Bible with a cracked leather spine, highlighter on every other page. Says, turn the other cheek, ain't just a slogan. It's a narrow road you gotta pay.
You pass the plates and the casseroles, fix the porch when a storm rolls through. When they curse your name, you hit your knee.
Say, Father, bless them like you do.